This country was one of the founding nations of United Nations and a permanent member of the Security Council. However, in less than 2 decades, it was kicked out. As World War II came to an end in 1945, representatives from 51 countries gathered in San Francisco to establish the United Nations. While many nations signed the charter, only 4 were designated as sponsoring nations: the United States, United Kingdom, Soviet Union, and China. U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt envisioned a post-war world order led by the 4 policemen: the U.S., UK, Soviet Union, and China, each responsible for maintaining stability in their respective spheres of influence. The United States was to have hegemony in the Western Hemisphere, Soviet Union was to dominate Eastern Europe and Central Asia, the UK was to maintain stability in its colonial empire in Western Europe, and China was to dominate East Asia. This idea was controversial. Winston Churchill suspected that the US intended to use China as a counterweight to British influence in Asia, while both the British and Soviets doubted China's ability to govern itself as the country had been embroiled in civil war since 1927. Since 1927, China had been divided between the nationalists led by Chiang Kai-shek and the communists under Mao Zedong. The situation worsened in 1931 when Japan invaded Manchuria. By 1936, the Japanese invasion of China was imminent. Under pressure from his subordinates, the nationalist leader Chiang Kai-shek agreed for alliance with communists, and a second united front was formed to resist Japanese invasion. This invasion happened in 1937. However, the alliance collapsed after Japan's defeat in 1945, reigniting the Chinese Civil War. After 4 years of intense conflict, the communists emerged victorious in 1949, establishing the People's Republic of China on the mainland. The nationalist government retreated to Taiwan, where it continued to claim sovereignty over all of China. Both sides insisted they were the legitimate rulers of China, setting the stage for a decades-long diplomatic battle. Despite losing the mainland, the Republic of China and Taiwan retained international recognition, including its seat as a permanent member of the UNSC. Throughout the 1950s and 60s, the US and its Western allies continued to recognize the ROC as the legitimate government of China, while the Soviet Union and Communist bloc backed the PRC. However, global politics began to shift in the late 1960s. Relations between the Soviet Union and China deteriorated. Both the countries even fought a short 7-day war in 1969 in border regions of Manchuria and Xinjiang province. Seizing this opportunity, the US under President Nixon sought to improve relations with Beijing, using China as a counterbalance against the Soviets. This diplomatic maneuvering culminated in 1971 when the United Nations General Assembly passed Resolution 2758, officially recognizing the PRC as the only legitimate representative of China. As a result, the PRC replaced Taiwan as a permanent member of the UNSC, and Taiwan lost its seat at the UN entirely. Unlike other displaced governments, Taiwan was not allowed to remain as a separate member state because both Taipei and Beijing insisted they were the one true China. Taiwan's exclusion from the UN marked the beginning of its diplomatic marginalization. In 1949, only 10 communist countries recognized the PRC. Today, the situation is reversed. Only 12 countries still recognize Taiwan, all of them minor players on the global stage. The shift reflects China's economic and political rise. Today, China's legitimacy is no longer questioned. It is acknowledged as a global superpower. Meanwhile, Taiwan, once a founding member of the UN, remains locked in diplomatic isolation, its international status hanging in uncertainty.